She thought I never read her book. She thought I was too dull, too average, too harmless to notice. But I read every word, every plot twist, every little trick, every manipulation she wrote for her fictional husband. And I smiled because she didn't know she was writing my playbook. You see, my wife wanted to be a novelist. She worked on her manuscript every night after dinner. I'd walk past her desk, kiss her on the head, ask how the story was going. She'd smile and say, "Oh, just something silly, a thriller, you wouldn't be interested." But late one night, curiosity got the better of me. She had gone to sleep. Her laptop was still open. The file name, The Exit Strategy. I started reading, and what I found wasn't a story. It was a plan.
A plan to leave me.
Empty our accounts, destroy my name, and walk away smiling just like the woman in her book. But I never told her I knew. Instead, I let her keep writing, and I followed her chapters, but not the way she intended. I always thought marriage was a quiet kind of comfort, like a favorite sweater you wear on cold evenings. You don't really notice it's there until one day it doesn't warm you anymore. That's what being married to Emily felt like in the last 2 years. Familiar, predictable, cold. We'd been together for 9 years, married for 7. At some point, the spark dimmed, but I blamed myself. Maybe I was boring, maybe I worked too much, maybe love just matures into something quieter. Emily started writing again, said it helped her express what she couldn't say out loud. I thought that was healthy, therapeutic even. She called it her little side project, a novel she'd been meaning to write for years. She'd sit at her laptop every night after dinner, typing away with a glass of wine beside her. Sometimes she'd smirk as she wrote. Other times she'd sigh heavily. When I'd ask her what it was about, she'd wave me off with a laugh. "It's just a dumb thriller," she'd say. "You wouldn't like it. Very twisted." She was right about one thing. It was twisted. One night, a little after 1 a.m., I couldn't sleep. I walked into the living room to get some water and saw her laptop still glowing on the couch. She must have fallen asleep upstairs without closing it. I don't know what made me open it. I wasn't suspicious. Not yet. Maybe just curious. Maybe I missed her. There it was, a Word document titled, The Exit Strategy, Draft 3. I clicked it. The first line stopped me cold. "He's predictable. That's why it'll work." I scrolled. And what I found wasn't fiction. It was her voice. The main character was a woman named Elena. A woman married to a man who sounded exactly like me, down to his job, his awkward humor, the way he stirred coffee 3 times, never 4. Elena was planning to leave her husband. She was documenting every step. How she'd create a private bank account. How she'd flirt with a coworker for the alibi. How she'd emotionally withdraw, so when the break came, he would seem like the bad guy. How she'd blame his inattentiveness to take full control of the narrative. How she'd transfer assets slowly, in amounts just under reporting thresholds. It wasn't just a story, it was a blueprint. And every sentence I read felt like a slow-motion car crash I couldn't look away from. I didn't confront her. I didn't slam the laptop shut and storm upstairs. Instead, I read more. Then I copied the file onto a flash drive. Then, I smiled. Because something in me woke up that night. Something I didn't know I had. Not rage, not panic, precision. If she wanted to write a story about betrayal, she'd just made me the editor, and I was about to rewrite the ending. For the next few days, I said nothing. I made her coffee like always. I asked about her book like always. I kissed her goodnight like always. But I was watching, observing. There's a particular kind of clarity that comes when someone shows you who they really are, and then pretends they haven't. Every little thing she did now felt like a line in that manuscript. When she smiled at a message on her phone, I knew what chapter we were in. When she stayed late at work finishing a report, I could guess the scene. I read and reread her document every night after she went to bed. I studied it like a chess manual. She thought she was playing against someone slow, distracted, emotionally dependent. She had no idea the man she was trying to dismantle had spent his life building systems. I was a process engineer. I made a career out of spotting flaws others missed. I was trained to see what could go wrong before it ever did. So I started planning. First, I made copies of everything, not just the manuscript, her emails, her financial records, her cloud backups. She had a folder labeled Archive Drafts. Inside were notes about timelines, fake arguments she'd stage, even sample texts she planned to send to make it look mutual. She wasn't just leaving me. She was crafting a narrative where she was the sympathetic protagonist, and I was the cold, distant husband who drove her away. Second, I contacted an old friend. James was a cybersecurity consultant. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to justify what I needed. Discrete tracking, backups, legal copies with timestamps, everything admissible. James didn't ask too many questions. He owed me. Then came the most important part. I had to play the role. Convincingly. So I forgot things more often, missed dinner once or twice, looked tired, disengaged. I let her believe her plan was working, that I was slipping into the passive, dull man she'd written. She started acting bolder. One night, she came home wearing perfume she hadn't worn in years. Another night, she took a shower at midnight. I didn't say a word, but I logged the timestamps. Everything was data now. I started moving small amounts of money too. Nothing illegal, just preparation. I created a second checking account under a new LLC. I'd quietly registered 2 months earlier. Its name? Redline Systems. Just vague enough to sound like a tech project, just real enough to avoid suspicion. I knew how she'd move. The manuscript said she'd wait for the end of the fiscal quarter, blame stress, claim space, rent a short-term apartment. So I bought that apartment. In cash. 3 weeks before she would. The lease was in the name of my LLC. She wouldn't know until it was too late. Every day, I thanked her in silence, for giving me her playbook, for underestimating me, for making this deliciously easy. But the best part? She kept writing, like a magician performing her final trick, unaware the mirror she used had been replaced, and every word she typed was another thread I'd pull. Soon, the entire thing would unravel. I started noticing the smallest things. She began locking her phone, something she'd never done in the past. She turned her laptop screen away from me when I walked into the room. Her browsing history vanished like clockwork. Even her tone changed, gentler, more patient, like she was preemptively managing guilt. She thought she was fooling me, but I had already seen the ending.
I knew what she was doing.
She was testing the waters, laying the foundation for her version of the story, creating a timeline that could be told with crocodile tears and whispered regret. So I gave her what she needed. I started forgetting anniversaries. I acted distracted, as if work was consuming me. When she sighed in the kitchen, or stared blankly at her glass of wine, I didn't ask what was wrong. I let her build her narrative. He's so distant now. We barely talk anymore. I don't even know who he is. Good. Let her believe I was becoming the husband she could justify leaving. Behind the curtain, I was anything but detached. I was surgical. I began crafting a quiet exit strategy of my own. Not one that would free me from the marriage, but one that would leave her with nothing she expected and everything she feared. I started separating our lives, pixel by pixel. Passwords, changed. Joint subscriptions, cancelled. Shared calendars, deleted. I told her my phone was acting up and got a second number. That number was tied to a new attorney. I met with him twice a week, midday, during her Pilates class. His name was Cole, a former military JAG officer turned family law expert. He didn't smile much, which I liked. I gave him a full breakdown, documents, backups, chapter excerpts. At the end of our second meeting, he looked at me and said, "This might be the most organized divorce I've ever seen." I replied, "It's not a divorce. Not yet. First I want her to finish the book." He blinked, then nodded. He understood. This wasn't about ending the marriage. It was about letting her write her own downfall, in real time. Letting her dig so deep she couldn't possibly climb out. I needed patience. So I played the part. The quiet husband. The boring man. The one she pitied, underestimated, dismissed. The more she relaxed, the more obvious she became. One night she left her laptop open again. Only this time, I didn't need to snoop. The manuscript synced to the cloud. I had daily access to every update she made. In chapter 18 she wrote, "He'll never see it coming." The irony is, he's the kind of man who never asks questions. He just accepts things. By the time he realizes what happened, I'll be on a plane. Perfect. Let her think I was blind. But I wasn't just watching her story unfold. I was editing the ending, one keystroke at a time. It happened on a Tuesday. Emily said she was going to a networking dinner downtown. She wore a dress I hadn't seen in years. Not for a lack of occasions, just one she hadn't chosen since, back when she still cared what I thought. She paused by the door, keys in hand. "I'll probably be late," she said without looking at me. "Don't wait up." I smiled. "Have fun." She hesitated, just a flicker of surprise. Maybe she expected resistance, suspicion, jealousy, but I gave her none of that. Because I already knew. She wasn't meeting clients. She was meeting Tyler. Tyler had first appeared in chapter 11 of her manuscript. A charming, emotionally intelligent co-worker who listened without judging. She described him as the contrast to her emotionally distant husband. Ironic, given that Tyler once sent company-wide emails with inspirational quotes in Comic Sans. But Emily wrote him into her story, like a savior. A man who would catch her as she escaped the emotional prison of her marriage. That night, I followed her. Not in a movie-style trench coat with a camera. I followed her through data. I'd already cloned her phone, had access to her texts, her Uber receipts, her calendar. She went to a rooftop bar called Leora. Reservation for 2 under Anderson, not our last name. They ordered a bottle of wine. She laughed 5 times. I know because the bar had security cameras. I didn't confront her. I didn't call her. Instead, I printed the footage, saved the chat logs, and sent them to a secure drive only my lawyer could access. I wasn't collecting evidence for revenge. I was archiving a story. Her story. Every move she made confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a strategy. And I wasn't going to interrupt it, because now she felt safe. She'd tested the first real boundary, and I hadn't flinched. That gave her confidence. She stopped hiding her manuscript behind passwords, stopped locking her phone at night. She even started leaving receipts in her coat pockets. Tyler was no longer a character. He was a plot device. And Emily had officially crossed the line from fiction into betrayal. Meanwhile, I kept reading her book. Chapter 22. It's almost done. Just a few more things to move. I'll be free. He still hasn't noticed. God, it's so easy. I highlighted that line and sent it to Cole, my attorney. His reply came a few minutes later. She's writing her own confession. Let her keep going. And so I did. But now my patience wasn't just strategic. It was personal. She had reduced me to a caricature in her own life. The invisible man. She didn't know that every time she smiled at her phone, I logged it. That every false detail she crafted into her novel was feeding the very trap she was walking into. The ending was already being written. She just hadn't turned the page yet. Something changed after that night. She came home tipsy, humming, hair a little messy, lipstick worn off in the corners. She smiled too much, poured herself another drink. Laughed at nothing. I didn't ask questions, just handed her a glass of water and said, "Long night?" "Just networking," she replied. She didn't look me in the eye. I nodded, then excused myself, said I had emails to finish. I went into the office, closed the door, and sat in silence. Not because I was angry, but because I finally felt the shift. You know when a building creaks before it collapses, or how the air feels different before a storm hits? That's what it was like. Something in her posture had changed. A weight had been lifted. She had officially decided she was going to leave me. She'd passed the point of hesitation. No more guilt. No more doubt. She thought the plan was working. Good, because that meant I could finally begin mine. The next morning, I did something subtle. At breakfast, I asked her what she thought about taking a trip this fall, maybe Colorado. Just the two of us, like old times. She blinked, caught off guard. This fall? I nodded.
Yeah, I thought maybe it'd be good for us. Reconnect a bit.
She stared at her coffee for a second too long. I mean, sure, maybe. I smiled. I'll look at dates. That single moment planted a seed of doubt in her. She didn't know if I knew. Did I? Was I just trying to fix something before it broke? Was I suspicious? Or just clueless? I needed her uncertain. Uncertainty creates mistakes. Later that day, she rewrote chapter 23. She added a line.
"Who's talking about trips now?"
I need to be more careful. Perfect. I didn't want her to stop. I wanted her to speed up, because the faster she moved, the sloppier she became. That week, I noticed something strange. She withdrew a large sum from our joint account. $9,200. Just under the 10K threshold that triggers automatic reporting. She was following her own script. But what she didn't know was that the joint account had a mirrored alert system. I had set it up months ago. So I wasn't just aware of what she was taking. I was matching it dollar for dollar into the LLC account. She was gutting the marriage financially. I was preserving its skeleton. Cole, my lawyer, reviewed everything. He even started drafting the divorce petition. We weren't filing yet, but we were ready. Meanwhile, I added something new to the game. I scheduled a couples therapy session. She didn't expect that. Therapy, she said. Yeah, I just feel like I've been distant. I want to work on it. She froze. Sure, I guess that makes sense. That night, she didn't touch her wine.
Didn't open her manuscript.
Just sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly. I had introduced doubt. Doubt makes writers hesitate. The best part, she thought she was still in control. But now, I was the one scripting the story. The first therapy session was a performance. Not for healing, God no. It was theater. She sat across from me, legs crossed, hands folded just tight enough to seem composed. The therapist, a gentle woman named Carol, asked us open-ended questions. I let Emily go first. She talked about feeling disconnected, about how life got routine, how we lost the spark. She never said the words affair or leaving. She didn't have to. She was rehearsing her victim narrative. I nodded, occasionally sighed, agreed with some points. I even added a few. I think I let the relationship coast too much. Maybe I got too comfortable. I don't always express myself well. Carol smiled. Emily relaxed. She believed we were there to fix things. She had no idea I was here to watch her squirm later when this recording would be submitted in court. That night, she went home silent. Didn't open her laptop. Didn't write. She sat in bed for 30 minutes, staring at the ceiling. It was working. I had disrupted the flow of her story. Chapter 24, the next morning, was noticeably shorter. Therapy was strange. He was too calm. I don't know if he means it or if something's off. There it was. The first crack. She sensed something. Not proof, just a shift. And shifts are dangerous when you're operating with guilt. So I doubled down.
I made her coffee in the mornings again.
Left little notes in her coat pockets. Offered to drive her to work. She was being emotionally sabotaged with kindness. She couldn't process it. Because in her story, I was the dull, detached man who wouldn't fight. But now I was confusing. Not clingy, not angry, just present. Too present. A second therapy session followed. This time, I asked questions. How can I better support you emotionally? When did you first start feeling distant from me? Is there anything I've done to make you feel unloved? Carol looked pleased. Emily looked terrified. She wasn't prepared for this version of me. She was writing a story about a marriage dying from silence. And here I was, setting it on fire with effort. When we got home, she poured a drink finally. Then opened her manuscript. She deleted chapter 25. Completely. That was the moment I knew. Her story had stopped making sense to her. It was no longer linear, no longer clean, no longer fiction she controlled. It was mess now. She didn't write for 2 days. Then, late Friday night, I caught her staring at me across the dinner table. Not with affection. With calculation. She was trying to decide if I knew, trying to see behind my eyes. I smiled at her, softly, as if I hadn't noticed. You okay? I asked. Yeah, just tired. Want to take a trip this weekend? No work? Just us. She blinked again. There it was, hesitation. Not from guilt. From fear. Because the man in front of her no longer matched the version on her screen. She couldn't predict me anymore. And people like Emily? They only thrive when they're ahead. She didn't know it yet, but she'd already lost. Because I'd stopped playing defense a long time ago. By the following week, her manuscript had changed completely. The chapters got shorter. Less romanticized, more mechanical. She wasn't crafting her exit anymore. She was checking boxes. I knew the signs. She had moved from fantasy into logistics. Booking appointments, deleting files, making plans. I even caught a Google search in her history. Best international destinations with no extradition treaties. Subtle, empty. She wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to vanish. I told Cole, my attorney. He didn't flinch. She's panicking. Let her. The more she rushes, the easier this gets for us. And rush she did. That weekend, she said she needed space. Said her sister had invited her on a spontaneous retreat in Napa Valley. I didn't ask questions. I simply said, "You deserve a break. I'll hold the fort." She kissed me on the cheek and disappeared for 4 days. But she didn't go to Napa. I knew from her Uber logs and geolocation that she spent those nights at a cabin north of Santa Barbara with Tyler. Cozy, romantic, a fireplace. She even posted a photo of the view on a burner Instagram account. She captioned it, "Sometimes the best things come after the worst storms." She was already rewriting our marriage in real time. That night, I poured myself a drink, logged the data, and updated the timeline. We were closing in on chapter 28. I could tell she was preparing for the final move, and so was I. I met with Cole the next day. We finalized the divorce filing, complete with proof of infidelity,
Financial misconduct.
asset manipulation, preemptive custody filing for our dog, Winston, because yes, I wasn't letting her keep him either. I also updated my living will and froze all joint investments. Emily returned that Thursday. Tone, relaxed, quiet. "How was Napa?" I asked, setting down her favorite tea. She flinched. Only slightly, barely perceptible. But it was enough. "Peaceful," she said. "I did some writing." "I'm sure you did." The next morning, she left early. By noon, she had withdrawn the last $12,000 from our emergency account. Then she made a single phone call to her sister, and one to her lawyer. I watched it all unfold in real time. Her book had entered its final chapter. She titled it, "Freedom Isn't Free, but It's Worth Everything." Poetic. She didn't know I had already finished reading it. I had even printed it, cover to cover. Cole joked we should get it bound. I said no, I'd prefer it as exhibit evidence. Saturday came. She woke early, showered, dressed sharp, packed a small suitcase. She kissed my forehead and said, "Going to the spa for the weekend. Need to clear my head." I looked at her and smiled. "Take all the time you need." She walked out the door with a sense of triumph. She thought this was the day she disappeared. What she didn't know was that this was the day she got served. The trap had been set for months, and now, the final scene was already in motion. The papers were delivered to the spa at 10:42 a.m. She was sitting in a white robe, sipping cucumber water in a lounge chair. Classical music playing softly, a citrus candle burning on the table beside her. That's when the receptionist walked over, holding an envelope. "Are you Emily Ward?" She nodded, confused. "This is for you." And just like that, her weekend of freedom turned into a legal ambush. Inside the envelope, petition for divorce, full documentation of her affair, financial misappropriation record, a motion to freeze joint assets, a letter stating that Winston would remain in my custody. The cherry on top, a printed copy of her manuscript. Every chapter, every fantasy, every betrayal, stamped Exhibit A. She didn't come home that night. She checked into a cheap hotel near the airport. I knew because I had alerts set on our remaining joint credit card. She spent 4 hours online, Googling legal terms, searching for emergency consultations. Then finally she called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello?" Silence. "Emily." A shaky breath. "Then, you knew." "Since chapter 3, I said calmly. She gasped. You read it?" "Every word, every lie, every plan." Another pause. "So this is revenge?" I smiled to myself. "No, Emily, this is accountability." She started to cry. But not the gut-wrenching sobs of regret. No. This was the quiet panic of a person who thought they'd won, only to realize they were the one being played. "You were never supposed to see it," she whispered. "That was your mistake," I replied. "You wrote the script but forgot who owned the stage." She hung up. I sat in the quiet for a long time. Not triumphant, not angry, just relieved. It was over. The performance, the guessing, the weight of pretending not to see. Now everything was clear. In the days that followed, she tried to push back. Her lawyer sent a response. Vague denials, emotional appeals. But it was too late. Cole and I had receipts for everything. Her own words, her own signature, her own book. She even admitted in chapter 19 that she had planned to drain the accounts while I was at a conference. "He won't notice until it's done," she wrote. But I had noticed. I had always noticed, because the thing she never understood about me is that I don't confront problems with rage. I outlast them. The court moved quickly. Due to the overwhelming documentation, I was awarded 80% of the joint assets. She walked away with almost nothing, except the manuscript that ruined her. She unpublished it from her writing app, deleted her backup files. But I still had it. And every time I passed that bookshelf in my study where the red folder sat, I smiled. Not because of what she lost, but because of what I never let her take. My dignity, my sanity, and my silence. Weeks passed. The paperwork was finalized. The accounts were settled. Winston slept soundly at the foot of my bed again. Emily tried once more to contact me, an email this time. No subject line. Just a single sentence, "You destroyed everything." I didn't respond. Because I hadn't destroyed anything. She had. I'd simply stepped aside and let her run headfirst into her own narrative. The book she thought would be her secret weapon became her confession. The lies she thought would give her freedom became chains. It's funny how betrayal always thinks it's smarter than the person it's betraying. But betrayal forgets one thing. We watch, we listen, we wait, and when the time comes, we don't explode. We don't scream. We pull the thread, quietly, patiently, until everything they built unravels in their own hands. I kept the manuscript, printed, bound, sealed in a leather cover. I placed it in a drawer in my study, labeled simply, "Her Story." Sometimes I take it out, not out of bitterness, but to remind myself how far someone will go when they think you're not watching, and how calm you must stay when you are. Therapy continued, but for me, not for us. Carol told me something that stuck. Survivors often blame themselves for not seeing it sooner. But the truth is, you saw it exactly when you needed to. She was right. Had I confronted her when I first noticed the shift, she would have denied it. Had I panicked at the first draft, she would have destroyed the evidence. Had I lashed out, I would have become the villain in her next chapter. But instead, I waited, not because I was weak, but because I was done playing by her tempo. I wrote my own ending, and now, I live it. Peaceful mornings, no tension when I walk through the door, no second guessing what silence really means. Just space. Real, unpolluted space. She tried to rewrite our past into a tragedy where she was the misunderstood hero. But life had a better editor, and he was quieter than she imagined. Last I heard, she moved out of state. She's working under a new name, started a blog about healing after toxic relationships. The irony would be hilarious if it weren't so common. But I don't think about her often anymore. The truth, she thought I was boring, predictable, passive. But she forgot. Still water runs deep. And when that water turns cold, it doesn't splash. It drowns quietly.